Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how you can talk to yourself. So the first...
Billy.
Hey, Keycat, your check cleared, by the way.
Billy, I need something.
Let me guess. More cash?
$300.
Okay, last time. It's in my wallet.
Thanks, Billy. Fighting.
Anyway, so today we're going to learn about how you can talk to yourself. Now, keep in mind, when you're talking to yourself, there's no need to be extra polite to yourself. So using the you form or formal speech when speaking to yourself, which normally both show politeness, would sound awkward. Also, don't use honorific speech or humble speech when you're talking about yourself. These, again, are only for speaking about others. Instead, you can just use casual speech, and this includes the plain form. For example, if it's cold, you could say to yourself out loud, 추워, it's so cold, or 춥다. Both have the same meaning. Also, when speaking to yourself, only use 나 instead of 저 to say I or me. So we learned that you can use the plain form when speaking out loud, and it's kind of like making a casual announcement in front of everyone in the area who can hear you. But it can also be used just when you're talking out loud to yourself. Even if other people are listening, it's still acceptable to speak casually like this using the plain form, as long as it's clear that you're only talking to yourself. So to make it clear that you're only talking to yourself and not trying to make a casual announcement, which would be casual speech, avoid making any eye contact when using this. For example, saying 춥다 while looking towards someone can be seen as speaking casually, almost as if you're making an announcement. Hey, I'm cold. But saying 춥다 while looking away from anyone else would not be seen as an announcement, but just as talking to yourself. One more thing you can also use the plain form with, which is also similar to this, is when you're talking to yourself and making an exclamation out loud. For example, in a restaurant, you may want to express that the food tastes really good to yourself, out loud. 오, 맛있다. It tastes good. Then afterward, you could look at the host and express the same thing. 정말 맛있어요. It tastes so good. Again, it would sound awkward to say 맛있어요 to yourself, as that would only sound polite towards someone else. And again, it would sound impolite to say 맛있다 towards someone else, unless that person is someone who you would normally speak casually toward, as this would sound like you're just making an announcement to them. Now, this is just a reminder, but when you use honorific speech and humble speech, again, those would only be used when talking about other people. But this doesn't mean that you don't use these when you're talking to yourself. Again, as long as it's about someone else. Here's what I mean. Here's an example of each, used when speaking to yourself. 선생님이 도와주시겠지? The teacher will help me, right? 내가 이미 선물 드렸나? Did I already give them the present? When you're speaking to yourself, you actually have a few options for grammar forms that you can use besides just the normal casual speech ending. For example, hey, here are some of those. Now, typically, any form can be used to yourself as long as it's not otherwise polite toward the listener. Here are a few along with their uses. First, for making statements, that is, just for saying anything, you can use the plain form as we learned. When using questions, you can use the G ending. Or to make soft questions, you can also use 나 or 가. When you're trying to remember something, you can also use the ending Torah. Since we've already learned about using the plain form when talking to yourself, let's review the others. When you're talking to yourself and you want to ask a question, you can also use the normal G ending. Now, this is kind of like you're trying to confirm something that you thought. And this G is used in the same way as asking someone else, but now to yourself. And when speaking to yourself, you'll most often see this used with a past tense verb stem. For example, 뭐였지? What was that? 그 사람도 있었지? That person was there too, I'm certain. 그렇지. That's right, and I knew it. But that's not all. You can also use the regular na and ka endings, as we learned previously, which can kind of add a soft feeling to your question and express that you're more curious to know the answer. So again, these endings may sound a bit softer than just using ji, and are therefore a little less direct. For example, 엄마였나? Was that mom? 그런가? Really? 집에 없나? Are they not at home? Note that this form will not be used with question words. For example, 뭐, 언제, 어디, and others. For those, you can use the 지 form, or the Torah form, as we'll learn next. Another option you have when you're asking a question to yourself is by using the Torah ending. Now this one expresses that you simply forgot something and are trying to remember it. Therefore, it should only be used to ask questions which you knew the answer to but simply forgot. For example, 뭐였더라? What was that? I can't remember. 어디 있었더라? Where was it? I can't recall. 파티에 누가 왔더라? Who came to the party? I can't remember. Note that this Torah is from the same form as 토라고요, which is used in speech, but its usage here is a bit different. And finally, you can actually use the plain form, which we learned is used for statements, as a question when you're speaking. Now, by that I mean with a rising intonation at the end, as if it were a question. Again, this will be in casual speech. For example, 어제 철수를 만났다? Yesterday, I met 철수. Note that this is not a question, although it does have a rising intonation. This would then be followed by continuing the rest of the conversation. Now, the reason why this works is because the actual feel of the plain form when it's used in speech is that you want to get someone else's attention. So in this way, it can mean, hey, listen to me for a second. And this feel explains both how the plain form can be used as an announcement and how it can be used when you just want another person to pay attention to what you're saying. I have some more notes for this lesson before we finish, but first let's do a listening practice. Here, two friends are discussing what they should eat for lunch. First, 은경 says, 아, 배고프다. Ah, I'm hungry. 유빈아, 유빈. 오늘 점심 만들기로 한 게 누구였지? Who decided to make lunch today? 글쎄, 누구였더라? Who was it? I can't remember. 아, 우진이가 하기로 했어. 우진 decided to do it. 뭐 만들 거래? What did he say he'll make? 몰라. I don't know. 우진이 요리 잘하는데. 우진 is good at cooking. 기대된다. So I'm looking forward to it.
아, 배고프다, 유빈아. 오늘 점심 만들기로 한 게 누구였지? 글쎄, 누구였더라? 아, 우진이가 하기로 했어. 뭐 만들 거래? 몰라. 우진이 요리 잘하는데 기대된다.
Next, try to do this quick quiz on your own. You can pause the video here and then resume it when you're ready for the answers. Here are the answers. The first one is false. To make it clear that you're only talking to yourself, avoid using any sort of body language. You would want to use some body language, at least to make sure that you're not directly talking to someone else. The next one is also false. The na or ka endings can be used to ask yourself a question, such as ones involving who, what, where, and other question words. We learned that for these, you should not use that form. And the last question is true. The Torah ending can be used to ask yourself a question when you're trying to remember something that you forgot from the past. Note that there may be times when speaking to yourself out loud could still be considered impolite. For example, it might be rude to say things out loud to yourself during a business meeting. So always consider the situation before speaking in this way. So in this lesson, we learned about how you can talk to yourself out loud. And in the next lesson, we're going to start learning about how you can mix these politeness levels that we've learned in this whole course. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.